everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Willow. This took me a little bit longer to make than I realized, mainly because I thought I had 16 hours of recording, which was a lot more than I realized. I felt like I had only played for 6 hours, but yeah, no, I had 16 hours of total recording of me working on this park, and it took me a while to figure out how to edit it and really make things into a cohesive video. So at first I had, like I said, 16 hours, sped it up 10 times, and then from there I had 2 hours of footage. Then I was able to cut it down into 50 minutes, and I started doing the recording, and I ran out of things to say after 17 minutes. I'm sure you can see the time-lapse part's only 20 minutes long now. I managed to cut it down even more. So I ended up cutting a lot of me placing down every single part. I cut it out. I just feel like no one needs to see me place every single board and every single piece of steel or whatever I'm putting down the park. So it's more of a highlights reel, and I added transitions between the main cuts so it's not super jarring or anything like that. So let me know what you guys think about the editing style, and if I cut too much or if I cut too little. I'm definitely open because this is, like I said, this is my first time really doing it. Especially doing an actual time lapse. It's like the first episode I didn't even bother recording it. So we'll see if I like this. I think I wrote down some talking points, so I think I'll be able to kind of blabber on for the entire 20 minutes of this fun. So anyways, yeah, so in this second episode, I mainly focus on the wooden coaster, mainly adding the scenery around it. So as you see right here, I'm working on the roof of the station. I decided to do a custom roof just because what I was going for, there wasn't really any in-game pieces right now that could really achieve what I was trying to do. And what I was trying to do was have a really steep spired roof that you see me framing here that has a flat top. And this roof had the roof and the station in general had a couple of influences. So the first and probably the biggest influence for the station was technically Disney Main Street, but really it was Shy Guys Main Street sets. So if anyone grew up playing Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, they know that in the OG era of RCT3, custom scenery was the biggest thing in the game for anyone that wanted to play realistically. So unlike Planet Coaster, that has like a workshop and makes it really easy for people to share their own creations, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, they had websites online that were pretty similar. When I say share people's creations, I don't mean people would share parts, but the biggest thing that I feel like a lot of people would share was custom scenery. So people would 3D model different, basically scenery packs. I think SketchUp was a big software they would use to model custom scenery objects, and then they'd upload on these websites. Like RCT Go was a big one, and you would be able to download it and then install it into your game. And it wasn't easy like the TMTK workshop for Planet Coaster 1 where you just download it from Steam and it immediately goes into the right files. You had to manually download it, and then you'd have to find the right file path to put it in, and it was a whole bit of, could be a hassle at times. So it was really interesting though, because people would literally make custom scenery packs, and it was fantastic. People would make different buildings, there'd be a whole set of trees. You can get custom flat rides and custom roller coaster models too to put into the game. It was really cool, and I feel like Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 especially had a huge community just making these custom assets for the game. And one of the biggest ones I always played around with was the building sets. And one of the building sets that I loved building was Shy Guy Main Street sets. So basically, they're different building sets with all the custom scenery that pretty much modeled the Main Street at Disney World or Disneyland or whatever Disney you want to call it. So it's all Victorian-era style, Victorian-style scenery pieces. And I loved using them just because those parts, they work for I feel like they work for any type of theme park. They had just really nice wall sets that are just simple plaster walls. They had the nice roofs that are similar to the one I'm building here. And I use them in pretty much all my parks because I love playing Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. Even if I wasn't going for a Disney style park, more like a just generic theme park, I think I use them so much. So that's what I was going for. I was kind of basing it off of this scenery set, and one of the things I had was roofs that looked similar to the custom roof I built right here, and so that's kind of the idea I was going for using it. And then another influence from it was with the Victorian era was back in the day, I used to watch all the YouTube videos of Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. And there's this one video, it was Wet and Wild was the name of the park. It was just this guy. He was working on a Wet and Wild amusement park, which is kind of this idea I'm going for with this park, where it's really just a generic theme park I feel like you'd be able to find in the United States. And I could tell that it seemed like it's definitely based off like a lot of the classic parks. Definitely probably Wet and Wild was one. And one of the things he had in these parks during these videos, he had a aero corkscrew coaster he built. And the station for it was built completely using the Shy Guy Main Street sets. And pretty much it looked similar to the building I'm building here, where it had like the roof, the steep roof with the flat top, and then there's a Shy Guy Main Street sets right here in the video if you look briefly. But yeah, and then it had two spires on top. Now, as you see, as I keep on building here, this one here is going to have one spire, but that was another influence. If you search it up on YouTube, the video is called, I think, 2008 Wet and Wild RCT3 Park Tour or something along those lines. And if you go through it, you'll probably see the building that you can tell I'm going after. It has a red roof instead of purple, but still. So anyways, yeah, that was another influence. And then last influence for this station was a Victorian themed station that used to be at Kings Island Amusement Park in Mason, Ohio. So it was the station for the now defunct roller coaster called Vortex, which was another aero looper. And I always thought the station was really cool just because it had this, like I said, it had this cool Victorian theme. And I really thought another thing that stood out to was that it didn't really fit the ride, because Vortex was a 80s coaster themed to like the future or something. And I thought it always looked out of place, especially as a Victorian-era building, and the coaster itself was black and orange. But the reason that it didn't really fit the theme was that the station was never originally for the Vortex itself. It was actually the station for a different defunct coaster that was before the now defunct Vortex, which was called the Bat. So if you don't know anything about the Bat, the history of the Bat, it was the first aero suspended coaster, and the ride was a total failure. The biggest issue that I've read online about it really was that they didn't bank the track. If you ride an aero suspended coaster, it's still around today, you'll know that the track's pretty much banked. While it still does swing around, a lot of the banking probably takes the forces of the ride. And I'm guessing the reason Aero didn't bank the track was that because they figured, the swinging would be able to do the banking for you. Why spend the money to, twist the tubes and, make this complicated track pieces when you keep everything flat and make it a lot easier to manufacture and probably a lot cheaper too. But then the issue was that because it wasn't banked, it's putting a lot more stress on the track. And I'm sure there's probably issues with not so much strength, but more issues with cracking. Because over time, metal cracks, it loses its strength over time. If anyone who studied engineering would know this. So I'm sure that's probably the main issue, which is why it only lasted for like a few years. But because it was called the Bat, I think a Victorian themed station kind of matched the name. Because I feel like you'd find bats in a Victorian-era house or something along those lines. So yeah, those are the main influences with the station. It kind of goes all over the place, but the general idea is that it has some Victorian influences. And I think with Planet Coaster nowadays, especially with the ability to scale pieces, this is a really easy theme to pull off. Like, I love how the roof came off. I love the wooden bracket I used as a roof tile. I just think it's really easy to work with. And two, I just think it looks great as a roof tile just because it's just a nice square little piece. Kind of has a similar texture to a roof tile as well. So yeah, I was really happy with how that turned out. You can see me building spire right here. I started off by framing everything. Framing it just using the wooden support pieces. That way it made it really easy to line the tiles up and make sure it came up to the point I was looking for. So yeah, with this park in general, I am definitely going, as I said in the first episode, I'm going for just a generic amusement park that maybe has been around since the 1800s. And I think starting it off with a wooden coaster is a great way to begin the park because realistically, for this park, I want it to be kind of more like Cedar Point, maybe a little bit like Kennywood, but I definitely want to have more modern coasters in it. So I think in future episodes, I'll probably start building some more modern things. Maybe I'll go into the 90s next, and then forward into the 2000s, and 2010s, and now the 2020s. But I think starting off with a nice classic wooden coaster to greet people as they walk in brings a nice charm to the park. Especially when a lot of the entrance area looks like something you find in more of a classic amusement park to begin with. I think the wooden coaster really complements that. So right now I'm building a clock on the spire, and this was probably the hardest part to build. Not so much that it was hard to make it look right, it was just hard to work with the scenery pieces, because for whatever reason, you'll see eventually I sank these geometry pieces into the into like that back face of the clock, and then I realized I didn't like the geometry pieces. So you see me deleting them there, and I added in the numbers themselves. And I thought that looked a lot better, but it was really hard to select those numbers for whatever reason. Because it was so close to that back face, it kept selecting the bigger things around it. So it was really annoying to work with. And eventually, I found this little trick where if you hold down Control, and you select the things, try and select the numbers, and it will just select like the stuff around it you don't want. So what you should do is just select all the stuff you don't want, delete it, and then hold in Shift, select all the numbers because there will be nothing else there for you to select. Select the numbers and then hit Control Z, and it'll bring everything else back. So once I figured that out, it started going. It was a lot easier to work with, but it could be a real pain. I feel like there's something wrong with like the click boxes of the numbers themselves. But either way, I'm really happy with how that turned out. I think it adds like a nice centerpiece to the spire. So I was thinking about maybe just putting down a window or something easier, but that took I don't know. I looked around at some other influences, and I thought a clock would look nice there. So yeah, as I'm finishing up the spire here, the next thing you'll see me start building is the speed rail. This is something I feel like I don't see too often. Oh, almost not quite the speed rail. This is we're just finishing up the station post. I forgot that the roof is floating. But after I'm done building these station posts, you'll see me start building the speed railing. So if you don't know, speed railing is like that generic, just metal railing you see at a lot of theme parks, especially with the cattle pens, where usually it's just the stainless steel tubes. Yeah, you have your posts, vertical posts, and then you have just two horizontal posts connecting it, one at the top and one in the middle. That's something I really wish they would just have an inbuilt model in the game, because it's so common in all the theme parks, at least in the United States. Like you see it even at Universal towards the beginning of the queues. It's something I really wish they would put into the game, just because it's so, like I said, it's so generic. You see it at every park. I don't see why there isn't a model for it. But luckily, it's also really easy to make with the scalable support pieces now. So you see me right here. I'm starting to put it together, and it took me probably like 30 seconds to put that whole little scenery grid together. I'm putting in some railings too. And once that was built, I would just copy and paste it and place it along the path. And I cut most of that section out just because it just was super tedious, and it really isn't that exciting to watch. And also it's kind of hard to watch too because I moved the camera around so much. But you see I did a quick little cut, and now all the speed railings placed down. I think that adds a nice realistic touch to the coaster compared to using with the in-game railing. Because I don't like when you have the paths side by side and you'll see like two railings right next to each other. Because in real life, no park would really ever do that, just because you have to pay for those railings, and why would you have two directly next to each other when you just have the paths share one? So anyways, yeah, really happy with how that railing came out. And then after this, I built the sign. I tried to make it look like a retro 60s amusement park sign that you see for like a wooden coaster or flat ride or something. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Just some generic sign pieces, and I gave the ride a new name. I was going to call it the Blue Streak, but the main reason I changed it was because the blue I used for the roof I thought looked too purple. And then after I realized this, I didn't feel like trying to change every single roof tile to make it a more bluer blue. So I figured the Blue Streak wouldn't really work anymore as a name. So instead I called it Haley's Comet. I don't know, it just feels like something you'd see from like a 60s coaster. Like something would just be called like Haley's Comet or something along a space theme. Especially if the coaster, which ideally for this coaster I feel like would be built around the 60s. Because that's right during the space race. So, spaceships and NASA and outer space was all, and just everything was all in the news. So I feel like Haley's Comet is probably a fitting name for a coaster built in the 60s. So yeah, once I got the sign built, I did a lot of foliage. I cut a lot of it off camera. Like I've mainly just placed down trees and bushes. It's really nothing too exciting. This is probably the most exciting part as far as the foliage goes. Even then, it's something too crazy. And I thought it's nice. I thought it tied everything together pretty well. And then over here in this little planner, I added a little planet to kind of fit with, again, a little space vibe I'm going for. This is probably the extended theming this ride's going to get also. Because again, coasters in the 60s, general amusement parks don't have too much theming, especially with the older stuff. I do find it interesting, though, how Cedar Fair or Cedar Flags, whatever you want to call it, have really been upping the scenery in the past couple years. I really think they're adding little storylines to their new rides. that I think fit really well. Because it's not like a Disney ride where it's like a full cohesive story going through, but there's a little vibe going on. Like my favorite one that I've ridden recently was Copperhead Strike, a Carowinds. And it's moonshine themed, so it's hillbilly moonshine themed, and they did a really great job with the theming. Where there's maybe not like necessarily a cohesive story where it's like being told to you, but just when you stand in line, you see all this moonshine, distillery equipment, and just the general vibe is. I think it's fun. I think it fits the North/Southern Carolina charm the park definitely has. So yeah, I think definitely in the future coasters will probably add a little bit more of a theme, but nothing to the extent of Disney or Universal. So, anyways, what I'm building right here. There we go. Sorry, my headphones got messed up. So, anyways, I'm building right here is just a little shack on top of the lift hill. You see this a lot on a lot of older wooden coasters from the 60s. My biggest inspiration for this one that I had in mind when I was building it was the Blue Streak at Cedar Point. I don't really know why all these coasters had them in the 60s, because I don't really see what it would be covering. It's not like the chain return is something that really needs to be covered, especially like rides like the 20s and 30s didn't have covers on top. So I feel like it's probably just a style that the era, or a style of the era, really. But I really like how that turned out. And then right here, you see me building a cover over the entire brake run. The reason I'm doing this is because what you'll see later on in the video is I put upstop brakes to cover the fin brakes on the brake sections. So if you don't know what an upstop brake is, there's a couple different types of wooden roller coaster brakes. You have your magnetic brakes. Then the most common one that you see nowadays is usually the fin brakes, which you also see them on a lot of steel coasters, where it's just two. They basically clamp a fin on the bottom of the train. And then what you see on a lot of classic coasters are upstop brakes, where pretty much it's like two, usually wooden or steel boxes that rise from the track. I think it's wood with like a steel running rail on top of it. But either way, they sit in the center of the track and they rise up and push up on the bottom of the trains whenever they go through. Now, these brakes were super common back in like the 20s and 30s. My guess is that whenever they had the handheld controls, that's just the way they had to do it. That could break something that was powerful enough to break it. At least that's my theory, because I'm guessing fin brakes weren't really a thing, or maybe it was manufacturing. It was hard to manufacture, something along those lines. But you see me putting them in here. That's what they look like. The reason I put the cover over this entire section is that upstop brakes don't work well when it's wet. The water can allow them to slip and not brake them properly. So most of these coasters usually have to have some kind of cover over the upstop brakes. Now, coasters that still use upstop brakes, off the top of my head that I know of in my area, is definitely at Knoebels. So you have the Phoenix and you also have the Twister. Those are the two I really know that use upstop brakes, and you'll see that they're completely in the cover. Now, I used to work at Kennywood Park as a ride operator, and one of the rides that used to have upstop brakes that they recently converted to fin brakes was the Thunderbolt. And I know that's one where I never operated it, but I was a ride operator. I was on the Exterminator crew. But I know I've always heard the Thunderbolt, that was one where you couldn't run it in the rain if it started pouring too hard, because even though there was covers on the brakes, once it got wet and the trains got wet, it wouldn't be able to brake too well. It would still be able to stop it for the most part, but there's still the chance where you could collide with the train that was unloading. So it was always wasn't able to run in the rain. So yeah, but anyways, moving on from upstop brakes, I went off on a little tangent there. You see me, I redid the shaping on this one little section because I thought it straightened out. It went from a bank to straighten out too quickly, especially for the big 4-seater trains, and I still think it kind of is, but I melted it out a little bit. And then I added a little block section there with the upstops. Now, in Planet Coaster, obviously, it doesn't have, there's no actual brakes there, because I kind of just wanted to drift through it. I didn't feel like covering up the fin brakes when I really don't want it to slow down. But I thought it looked nice, at least, making a little cover there. Another thing you might have seen is I added a little chain section leading up into the mid-course. The reason for that is because that would definitely, in real life, that would be a spot where the wooden coaster could potentially valley. So this happens a lot with, well, really any coaster. If you follow like a lot of like social medias, they'll sometimes report when it happens. With wooden coasters, whenever it's the start of a season, this again at Kennywood, this has happened a few times. At the start of the season, when there's no weight in the train, they just rebuilt the wooden coaster train, so nothing's really broken in yet. They run really slow. And even though wooden coasters typically conserve their speed better than steel coasters, there's still, at the beginning of the season, there's still a chance that they can valley. So you need to have those little chains there that's really it's not even a chain, it's really just an set of anti-rollbacks that make it click. That makes it click each time you go up it. That's to stop, catch it in case it doesn't make it up on the hill, so it doesn't go all the way back and then get stuck at a low point. So if it gets stuck on the mid-course where it's a high point, in theory, maintenance men should be able to push the train onto the mid-course and then push it through the rest of the layout. I've seen it happen, again, at Kennywood. Seen it happen on both the Jackrabbit along with the Thunderbolt. So it was always kind of funny when it happened. So yeah, every time you ride a wooden coaster and you see those set of anti-rollbacks, that's what that's there for, to stop it from valleying fully. That's obviously in Planet Coaster they don't have just an option to put down anti-rollbacks on the track, so I just used a chain section that I just covered up the chain part. And then the last little thing I built here, going off on that, is just a nice little loose articles bin, just something actually you can see in a typical amusement park. I'm real happy with how that turned out, and I believe that is the end of the time lapse. So I think I'll probably finish it off with a few cinematics of the park, and yeah, let me know what you guys think of this video, how the editing is, any things I could improve, how my my rambling was, if I was a good narrator or not. And yeah, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.
Lamu will on cars.